Hello and welcome to episode 43 of Generations Apart. I'm Jay.
No, I'm Robbie.
And on today's episode, we're going to be digging into the production process for this show. After over 40 episodes, we wanted to pull back the curtain and share the tech that we use at each stage, as well as our overall workflow. Hopefully you'll learn something along the way and find out about a few handy gadgets too. Well, before we get into that, Robbie, what's new with you?
What's new with me? Well, it's one of these news stories that if you weren't paying keen attention, you might have actually missed. And I have to say, I didn't see it originally. I think it was something that you flagged to me. But Apple actually had a sneaky little October announcement, their spookily fast keynote, hinting at the Halloween side of it. And I haven't actually watched it yet, but I've just seen a bunch of the updates that come out of it. But I've heard there's some maybe slightly cringy Halloween-themed entrances from Tim Cook as well. But there's a few devices that I caught my attention, at least in this event. And by the time this comes out, this is probably quite old, but I thought it was still worth noting. Doesn't need its own episode, as we typically would with some of the keynotes. It's just kind of minor updates. It was a very small event. But they've basically done a refresh of their MacBooks and their iMacs using introducing the new M3 chips. The M3 silicon chips, which by all accounts, again, look insanely powerful. There's a few criticisms in here and there that it's not as big a leap as a lot of the people were expecting. A lot of their marketing material is actually comparing the M3 to the M1, which feels a bit like cheating on stage, especially if you're using graphs to show the performance differences. And in fact, in some instances, some of the videos I saw, that they were comparing it to the old Intel MacBooks, which are at this point, like 4+ years old. So of course not fair when you're comparing the actual performance. But the main thing for me, and I feel like such a child, but they've brought out a new black version of the MacBook. And all of a sudden I'm getting a bit itchy. And I'm like, that looks really good. I know it's so childish to think of that as a reason to get one. But yeah, the new M3s look incredibly powerful. The main updates, I think, are to the GPU. The GPUs look much more powerful, and they've got a few updates on that front. And as well, the iMac has had an update, a bit of a refresh. So another one of the criticisms, a lot of the peripherals are still not Type-C, they're still lightning cable. So the stupid Magic Mouse issue of charging through the lightning cable on the bottom, so you can't use it whilst it's charging, is still a thing, unfortunately.
Would that be any less stupid if it was a USB-C port on the bottom there? I mean, it's just...
No.
It's like... It will haunt them for decades as a company renowned for great design. That will be a problem that they'll be stuck with for many, many, many years. Because even as the sort of most staunch fanboy of Apple, have to admit that was stupid. And also, I don't know if you know this. This is slightly aside. People have built like hacks to be able to use the mouse while charging, to build around this problem. Only to find that once they designed these 3D cradles and got it all into place, that because the mouse knows it's charging, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It basically stops working as a mouse
That's
when
so
plugged
annoying.
in until it's charged. So, I mean, it makes sense, I guess. But
if ever there was a time to refresh it, though, it's whilst you're releasing the iMac, where you're going to be talking about the peripherals anyway.
I get the impression, though, I think the iPhone USB-C thing has been rushed through to meet the European regulations, whereas, I guess they've got a bit more wiggle room and probably a boatload of lightning connector hardware in stock to work their way through before they worry too much about the peripherals. But I agree.
Another update actually on this is that they've, the base MacBook Pro, the 13-inch one, is now being cleared from the list. It's just the base 14-inch, which now has the same form factor, roughly, of the rest of the 14-inch and 16-inch lineup.
Yeah, the touch bar line's gone as well, hasn't it?
Touch bar's gone, yeah. That's one of the things that mentions in here. Touch bar is gone, is dead. I know a lot of people would be relieved because they hated it. But
I never got to play with it. I
it.
thought it was interesting as an innovation, but never had a chance to get hands-on with it.
Yeah, I heard it was pretty laggy, but yeah.
Interesting to your point around the comparisons they've made, and I do agree it seems a little odd not to compare to last year's devices, but I think there's possibly a good reason for that, which is that in reality, if you're sat with an M2 MacBook you probably don't need to be replacing it. You probably don't need to upgrade it. Even an M1, I've got an M1 MacBook Pro. It's amazing. I've never sat there and thought, oh, if only this was just a little bit faster.
Yeah.
Or if only the battery life was a little bit better. This thing will go for days and days and days, with basic use.
Yeah.
Obviously, heavy lifting takes its toll. But I do wonder if that's because the people that they're trying to get the attention of are those people that maybe have an Intel Mac. Because people have Macs for a lot longer. Perhaps they might do with a normal Windows laptop, just because, like you said, the way that they're optimized, they tend to last a lot longer.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's maybe a targeted effort. There's definitely the angle that you've mentioned, which is the graphs look better, the numbers look better.
Yes.
Because it is a more moderate upgrade on the M2. But I don't know that your M2 users are your target audience for this.
No. I don't think so
there will be some tech enthusiasts who just want to be on the next big thing.
Surely it's only the reviewers, though.
Yeah, and people with too much money.
Yeah.
Probably,
to
be honest. But
another cool thing actually about the event is the whole thing was filmed on an iPhone 15 Pro.
So that's what I was going to mention to you at the end, and we talked before we started recording. That was the thing that you hadn't mentioned when we first talked, because that was the bit that was most compelling to me.
Yeah.
Now they did release shortly after, and I think you're looking at it now on screen for those watching on YouTube, the behind the scenes. So yes, it was filmed on iPhones, which I still think this is impressive, regardless of what I'm about to say. However, the rigs that were put around the iPhone to deliver the professional quality are not the sort of thing that you're going to have at home. But that doesn't change the fact that the core image was captured through the iPhone's glass onto the iPhone sensor using the iPhone's hardware. So there was a lot of stuff put around it to provide, the kind of more professional look and feel, the lighting, the movement, the sort of rigs that the camera was held in, and presumably audio and everything else. But from a pure footage perspective, I think it's really impressive that the iPhone was able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if we're going to get this to load in time, but I'll include the link of the behind the scenes. Oh, there you go. So you can see some of the rig that sits behind it and the massive studios that are used to edit it. So there's not just the phone, I suppose, that's part of the...
No, but then I don't think that's what they're trying to say. Is it was shot... It's not a lie. It was shot on iPhone.
Oh, no,
it's just like any other media production. There's a way more that goes into it than just whatever the camera is.
They've done showcases like this
video
production before. Perhaps not the entire event, but they've done showcases of film-like quality clips that have come straight from iPhone filming. But yeah, quite cool.
Perfect segue as well, Robbie, probably unintentionally, into the subject of today, and also my what's new, which also feeds into the subject of today. So I wanted to highlight two new purchases new to my setup that feed into this topic. So I have recently purchased the very recently released Elgato prompter, which we'll have a look at and talk about in a minute, which is, and a quick summary, is as it sounds. It's a teleprompter with a built-in LCD screen that connects to your PC or your Mac so that you can use it for, as I am now, staring down the barrel of the camera, talking to you rather than, as I often do on these episodes, kind of looking around the room at the screens that you're on. So, hopefully better engagement for people watching me at home. But you can also use it for more traditional teleprompting. You can put text on and you can play and scroll that text, read it, etc. And the other purchase I bought at the same time to complement this, but also to support my editing workflow, was the new Stream Deck Plus, or less new, but newish Stream Deck Plus, which takes the Stream Deck formula. Again, we'll get into this in more detail, and it literally adds some knobs and a touchpad. Touch bar, in fact, probably more akin to what's on a MacBook.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about those in more detail because they're really relevant to this topic, and the topic of the episode, which is all about how we put together the podcast and the video for YouTube. And we did this really because it's techie and it's a bit geeky, and geeky. quite a lot of hardware and software goes into doing it. And we thought that you may find it interesting to understand exactly what happens, week to week when we're producing the Generations Apart show. So that was the real reason for this, to share those details with you. We will provide in the notes and description thorough links to most of, if not all of, the hardware we're using. So if you want to have a look at that, or you want to go and pick it up for yourself, or look for something similar, then of course you can do that. So we're going to start and broadly go in the order of our workflow. So we're going to start with the obvious place, and maybe it doesn't always come across that there's planning involved in this podcast, but we're going to talk about planning.
That's intended, definitely.
So Robbie, do you want to talk a little bit about what goes into the planning process for Generations Apart?
Sure. So I think I might have spoken on the podcast before that I'm a huge fan of a note-taking app called Notion. And it sounds just like a simple note-taking app, but if you've ever used Notion, there's much more to it than just simply taking notes. You can have lots of tables, relational databases in there, and what I've built out as part of our workflow is a kind of a project space within Notion, so that we have a few different lists. We compile all our notes. We can have tasks that we share between us as well. But we use that as a space to compile a list of ideas of episodes, and then we move them from phases of ideation to actually scheduling them in, and then having the dates assigned to each of these. And within these list items, Notion has a feature where you can, each item as part of these tables, you can actually go in and then use that as an individual notepad as well. So for each episode, we have like a bit of a prep script where we've got our intro that we are very well scripted and very well practiced at this point, even though if you've seen any of our shorts, we definitely screw up more than one occasion. So we have that built in there. We have the topic, our intro that we prep as well. And then we have all the notes for what we want to cover on that episode. So depending on the topic, it could be fairly light notes if it's just going to be a conversation between the two of us. Or if it's a topic that we deep dive in, so the one that's going to be released this week as we're recording is deep diving on the right to repair. And that was quite a heavy topic that we did a lot of research into. And so there's lots of notes on that. And then these also feed into the show notes ultimately that end up in the kind of description of our videos at the end, videos and podcasts. So that's just a bit of a glimpse as to how we put that together. And Notion is absolutely fundamental for that. the ability to do templating it as part of the list and share it between us, the different notes on there. Because we also do things like, if I, as I'm going through editing, spot any opportunities to do a short, I'll include that as a bit of a timestamp as I'm going through the audio edit. And also areas that we might want to cut, which we've started to recently do, if you've ever spotted those in any of our videos. And the blurb as well, just putting that together in there as part of the video.
And I think just from my perspective, because I was completely new to Notion, I'd never used it prior to working with you on this. I would always use, as an Apple fanboy, Notes, and I would die on the hill that was the best note-taking tool you needed. I'm not convinced of that anymore, and I have grown to really like Notion. It's become an integral part of not just the planning process, but as you mentioned, all the way through the production to publishing. And the fact that it's available on Mac, PC, it's got dedicated desktop apps, mobile apps. I've got it everywhere I need it. At any time, so it's worked really well for us and how we produce. I guess to accompany that, far less sexy or exciting, we use OneDrive, just a shared folder in OneDrive to store basic files and recordings and assets for the show, which we record on our independent machines, and we'll ship those backwards and forwards during the editing workflow, which we'll get into a bit later on.
Just before we move on as well, I just want to give a shout out, because I hadn't heard of Notion before. The way I discovered it was I was following a YouTuber called Thomas Franks. He used to do vlogging on kind of topics that he would be interested in, or productivity tips and things like that. And one of the things that he talks about quite a lot was Notion. And this was early days. It's quite a startup-y company. And he's since kind of, I think he might have decommissioned that channel and moved to completely just Notion tutorials and training, which is, he's got some fantastic channels on there if you want to learn about Notion. Look up Thomas Franks. I might include it in the notes as well, but there's just so much you can do in Notion, and he actually preps all his videos through Notion as well, so he's got a bit of a production workflow through there as well that he talks through in some of his videos. But yeah, just thought I'd give him a shout out.
No, as I talk about it, when I said I'd never heard of it, I had heard of it but never used it. I'd seen a couple of YouTubers preach it, and then I just thought, well, I don't know, why do I need that? Why would I need it? But I have to say, and I say it again, really have grown to rely on it heavily. And as I'm learning, I mean, I'm still very basic. I'm nowhere near as advanced as you, and I need to get a bit smarter with it. But yeah, it's become a reliable tool for the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
So once we've planned an episode, clearly we've got to move on to recording it. And there's two sides to that story. So we're going to start with the software, and then we'll get into both mine and Robbie's hardware setups, which are quite different. And we'll explain, why we picked what we've picked and where that's come from. So if we start with the software, I guess it's fair to say, Robbie, the bulk of the recording sits with you.
Yeah.
Because of how we've chosen to set this up. So it's a combination of OBS and Discord.
Yeah.
Do you want to cover a bit about how that's set up?
Sure, yeah. And this has been an evolving process over time. I think we started out and it was quite rough in how we captured everything. But I suppose before even we started recording, we can talk a little bit about the assets that we chose to surround this video. So this kind of cool neon look that we've got as part of this video for those watching on YouTube, these were assets that we just picked up fairly cheap online that you can get for OBS and then just kind of fit them in the background. And you can use as much or as little as part of these assets, but we thought this was quite fitting for our kind of generational gaming technology conversations. So we picked up that initially, had a few tests beforehand, and yeah, we use OBS to capture the video that's output from Discord, and that's just a screen capture basically of Jay that's on this Discord window over here. And then I've set up a bunch of transitions as well, so I can transition to my other screen. Say if I'm sharing an article, I've got a couple of hotkeys that I do to switch over to there, and all of that is captured in one video feed, including my camera, the screen that Jay's on, and the screen that I'm sharing on the other side as well. And the bit that was the trial and error was the audio capture, and that has been quite challenging, I think, from the start, mostly because to capture Jay's audio, I pick up basically the desktop audio, which is what's pushed out through Discord. But that also includes things like YouTube that I might display, or any audio that I show on screen as well. So there's a bit of a merging that happens between that audio, and I have to manage that carefully in the edit. And originally, I was capturing all of this audio in one output, one kind of MP3 file. And that just didn't work because our levels would be off almost every week. We'd have something slightly different, something that would change, and I'd have to try and fix it with compression. It doesn't really work when there's one audio track capturing all of these different variables. So I did figure out a way, and this is top tip for anyone who ends up doing this through OBS. There is a method in OBS where you can capture a video, and the audio that sits behind it is actually splittable between different channels. So I've got a channel that's split between the desktop audio and my audio, so at least that's separate, and I can manage the volumes between the two when I get to editing. But now we've even iterated on that, where you capture your audio from your side using OBS as well and send that to me in post. So we have that as a completely separate audio track from my desktop itself. So an iterative process over time, but Discord is fantastic really for capturing both the audio and the video. Once you get the right setup that you need, splitting the audio is definitely the main thing that I would recommend for sure.
Yeah, and I not a lot to add to that. I guess a couple of points. I don't know if you mentioned at the top there that OBS is free, so yeah, completely free to download. I use a slightly different version of OBS, so I use Streamlabs OBS, which is fundamentally the same software, only it's been simplified for setup for streamers. So you can basically key in your Twitch or your YouTube streamer information, and it pre-configures a lot of the back-end stuff for you. So when I was setting that up, it was with streaming in mind, but it has all the same capabilities, broadly speaking. I think if you're looking to do production like we are, vanilla OBS is probably better because you've got more control. There's more mods out there for it. You can do more with it. If you want quick and easy and streaming or just simple recording as your game, Streamlabs OBS is the way to go because it does a lot of the work for you. You don't have to learn as much. I've used both in the past, but Streamlabs was what I went with this time around.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to mention is that you mentioned the audio challenges. A couple of things as well. Discord was part of that problem early doors. So Discord by default puts a noise gate on your audio to get rid of kind of background noise, which can be a little aggressive at times. So often we would find my audio was kind of cutting in slightly late because the noise gate was removing some background noise, and then I'd start talking and it wouldn't pick it up fast enough. So we ended up having to take that off. And as Robbie said, eventually we iterated to not using my audio from Discord at all.
Yeah.
Other than for Robbie to be able to hear me while we're recording, which is essential. The other thing as well is that, and we'll talk about hardware in a minute, especially when it comes to cameras. We've got a nice balance here because of the way we've done it. It's fair to say have the superior camera. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Discord kind of levels the playing field a little bit because of the compression that's applied to my video feed as it reaches Robbie. So we do actually capture my video separately, but it actually looks better and more even when they're just put side by side. And that's not to say that Robbie's got a bad camera or setup by any stretch. It's just entirely different budget in terms of what he was going for versus what I'd already got. And again, we'll get into that.
Well, it's good enough for an Apple event.
Well, no, exactly, and that's why I say that not taken away from it at all. So OBS and Discord are our recording tools. Let's get into the hardware, and this is where it's going to get a little excessive, at least from my side. So I will caveat all of this by saying very little of this was bought solely for this purpose. Most of this hardware I have had or built up over a number of years for various projects and reasons. So between the two of us, Robbie is the audio guy, I'm the visual guy, and that's reflected in our hardware choices and what we do in the process.
Definitely.
So for me, and I don't know if you've got any of these links to hand, Robbie, but we'll start with the camera. You've already got it up.
Already up.
So my camera is the Canon M6 Mark II. It's a mirrorless DSLR, which I know that I think the Sony DSLRs are quite popular with streamers and content creators. I went for Canon because I've been using Canons for probably now 15 plus years. Going back to when I first started learning about digital SLRs and proper photography techniques at college. So those, I had bought cameras back then, clearly not this one. I'd bought cameras, lenses, all the equipment that was designed to fit a Canon. So rather than pivoting to an entirely different brand, when I decided a couple of years ago to consolidate my cameras down to a more modern single device, I'd got a proper DSLR, I'd got a camcorder and a more entry-level DSLR from my very early kind of photography days. I sold all of those devices and I bought the M6 Mark II. It was around the £900 mark, I think. So, quite a lot for a streaming camera, which is ultimately what it serves to do a lot. But I bought it for a multitude of reasons. It shoots 4K video. I've got an adapter that takes all of my Canon lenses, so it works with all of my existing hardware. It's still professional grade. You can still take really good pictures on it, despite it being mirrorless, because it is still considered to be professional level as a camera. But it just served a number of purposes in one device, and I thought I'd probably use it more. And I have. I've used it a lot more over the years, predominantly though for this purpose, for recording in this room. I don't take it out very often. It's not as convenient from a photography point of view as a good iPhone, so it tends to get left at home more than it leaves the office. So that's my camera. Supporting that then, I've got my Elgato Camlink, which is a small USB dongle that basically allows me to take a HDMI feed out of the Canon and directly into the PC and then capture it, which is obviously very convenient for this. It acts effectively as a very expensive webcam for the purposes of Discord and recording, but you can use it independently using OBS to record countless hours of footage or stream, which is great. Yeah. Around that then, lighting is clearly very important when it comes to any kind of good image. So I've got two Elgato key lights on either side of me. They are, I think, somewhere in the region of about £150 a light. They do smaller ones, which are probably, they weren't out when I bought these. They would probably have been better because these are quite large. But I use those when I'm at my desk, and I have an Elgato ring light, which the camera sits in when I'm capturing footage or over by my gaming consoles. So that's the kind of visual. Hardware-wise for me then, when it comes to audio, you can see on my head, I have these headphones. These are nothing fancy in terms of this particular use case. These are the Arctis SteelSeries 7X, which are basically Xbox headphones, wireless headphones, that they work on dual channel, so you can be connected to wirelessly to the Xbox and also to your device by Bluetooth, your phone, your PC, whatever. And I just cable them, there's the cable, for the purposes of recording. And and they work really well just as a comfortable set of sort of noise cancelling headphones. There are probably far better ones on the market for the purposes of this, but these are what I had, and I just repurposed them. And then microphone-wise, you can just about see the tip of it on the camera. This is the Blue Yeti. This is, I don't know how old now, I've probably had this 5 or 6 years. It's a USB, fairly high-end microphone, and I've got it mounted to an Elgato low-profile arm on the desk. And I use this for recording on this show. I use it for streaming. I use it for day-to-day work in my day job, plugged into my work device. So this gets a lot of use and has more than repaid its cost. You can buy them new for a little over £100. And then the last bit of hardware, before Robbie can take you through his setup, is the prompter I referred to earlier. So this is the newest piece of the puzzle. And the prompter is a fairly new product from Elgato. It's been out maybe a month or two. Robbie's got it on screen for those watching on YouTube. Again, we'll share links to all of the stuff I've just mentioned. But this will work with Elgato's Facecam, a number of standard camera lens sizes, as well as basically any other device with a slightly less sophisticated throw of cloth over the back to shut out the light. So it can be used in a number of different applications. It's pretty lightweight. It's currently mounted to the front of the camera on an arm, and all of that weight is being supported by a simple desk arm. And what it's basically doing, unlike a number of these teleprompters on the market, which commonly require you to put an iPad or similar device in to get that reflective display, this actually plugs directly into your computer. So that on the screen there, you can see on the picture, the base of the device is an LCD screen. It works as a second monitor, or third, or however many displays you've got. And it allows you to just drag over windows or use the teleprompter software to run scripts to record. Now, I've only had this for a week or so, and this is the first episode actually we've recorded with it. So hopefully I look a little bit more like I'm addressing you if you're watching us live. Sorry, not live, if you're watching us on YouTube. But I have to say, this has really changed the way, at least I record this show, because typically I was always looking off to the side to try and look at Robbie on the display, because we try to make this show conversational. We want to feel like you're listening to two guys having a nerdy chat, which is what it is. But I always look like I was looking somewhere else. So while I'm looking at Robbie, as I used to, I'm giving an example for those watching, I look like I'm looking away from the screen on the recording, and I was never happy with that. So when this product was released, I was straight in, I ordered one, and I got it, like I say, just a week ago. Really pleased with it so far. Haven't used it extensively, but look forward to using it on future episodes. So that's my hardware setup. Robbie, yours is a little bit different. Do you want to talk about yours?
Mine's a lot less based on the visual, I'd say. But I guess before we move on, Elgato have some really cool devices. This is something I never even thought of as the teleprompter for streaming and recording at home, for like the bedroom recorder.
Yeah, well, I mean, they pitch it as, they promote it as like being not only a device for streamers for what we're using it for, but also for Teams calls and Zoom calls, and which would be great. I'm not sure I've not tried it on my work device. Maybe I'll do that at some point. I don't think it's quite as plug and play as they make it out to be, because I don't know if you need the prompter software or not. I might be wrong. You might be able to just plug and play.
Just treat it as an extra
I'll have to give it a go. Yeah, I mean, I don't use this camera on my work computer, so I use a different camera. So it would be a whole lot of hassle to swap it over.
You just got to try and go into some really deep monologues that people are thinking are just coming off the top of your head. Like start quoting Shakespearean paragraphs. People are like, oh my God, you remember that so well.
Well, they're showing a video, and it's a really good use case for it, which is, PowerPoint obviously has its presenter view. So the idea that you would share your screen, the main presentation, but you'd put presenter view on this monitor. So you're looking down the camera, you've got your notes, you can see the slide. Really
That's
powerful
level.
For that purpose. Yeah. I mean, I would probably go to the length, if I had an important presentation, I'd probably go to the length of setting it up on the right PC and doing exactly that.
Yeah.
Really clever. So it's got a lot of uses, especially if you're remote based.
Yeah, definitely. So my hardware devices are much more on the visual side, but I will touch on much more on the audio side, but I will touch on the visual side, just my very light visual setup. So for recording the video on my side, I've actually just got my personal phone, my iPhone 14 Pro Max, and I'm using a USB cable into the PC and a bit of software called the Elgato EpoCam, I think it's called on the phone, but it's called the Elgato Camera Hub, I think is what it is on the desktop. Basically allows you to feed your phone into the PC as a webcam. But, I'll get onto the challenges in a second. The other hardware of the kind of more visual hardware that I've got is a very simple light that is facing me, which is just a desk lamp that has got a flexi head, and I've tilted it up to face me. It's got a bit of a diffuser on front of it, and I can tweak the warmth of the color and also the brightness. So it's on the lower setting, on the coolest the warmth setting as well. So I've got that kind of white-ish glow going on, which is, again, a work in progress. That was a recent development, an evolution over time, as a few people complained that I was kind of washed out with the color. I was too warm, so there you go. And just touching on some of the issues that we've had, literally just this second had an issue with the EpoCam breaking down and actually causing stuttering in the video link. So we've had issues like that when we've done streaming. It's very rare that we have it actually as we're recording the podcast, but for the first time for everything, 42 episodes, 43 episodes in, and there you go.
You literally couldn't make it up, though. It froze as you were about to start talking about your setup, which, like I said, we've only ever made one cut in an episode, ever, because we tend to try and do the whole thing uncut.
Yeah.
And now we've got to do two.
Yeah, look at that. Look at that. And just the irony of the fact that we're talking about the hardware as well. But there you go. So that's my visual hardware. It's my iPhone 14 Pro and then a very simple desk lamp that's pointed towards my face. I've also turned off some of the background ones so I stand out a bit from the video. In terms of the audio hardware, this is where I've got a bit more of an investment, I think. So I've got a microphone here that is the Rode NT1A, which is basically a studio mic for vocal recording more than anything else. But I had this anyways. I do music recording on the side, music production on the side. So I've used this for the podcast as well, and it has extra crispy, clear audio that is fantastic for editing. So this is my microphone. In terms of the rest of the audio, I've got my headphones here, which are the Biodynamics DT700 Pro, which again are studio headphones, and they're actually great as I'm listening to either the editing, but also listening to you through the monitoring of this recording as well. Again, I bought this mostly for music editing, but it's been fantastic for the podcast as well. So similar to you, and a lot of this hardware is not specifically bought for the podcast, but it's actually served me really well as part of the podcast as well. The other bit that I've got as part of the audio is my Focusrite Scarlett 4i4 Gen 3, and it's a USB-C interface, so I can plug in the microphone. This is an XLR microphone, it's not a USB microphone. So I needed something to convert that to a digital signal so I could pick it up as part of the audio recording. But again, I use this a lot for music recording. So there's a couple of different inputs that you've got in here, not just microphones. You can have, there's a jack option as well, so you can plug in your guitars and other devices that produce audio, so keyboards and things like that, and use that to record audio. I think actually when we met up in person to record one of our earlier episodes, I brought this with me, and I think we used it to record two audio at the same time. Yeah, so really useful for device. If you're recording podcasts in person with multiple people, it's great for that. Absolutely great for that.
And just on that point, because you've just reminded me, so you inspired my purchase, because I did buy a Focusrite. I think I bought the 2i2.
2i2.
It's currently retired because I've been using it for streaming. But very recently I've pivoted to use, I've had for a while now, I'm just going to reach out a shot 2 seconds, because I didn't make this note in my notes. So there's an argument against planning.
There you go.
This little device, which you see in a lot of YouTubers, which is the Rode, I don't know what the specifics are. It's just a Rode wireless mic and receiver, but they're tiny, tiny little devices.
Like
so there's one exactly the same size. Yeah, so you can plug a separate lapel mic in, but actually this will work on its own. It's got a microphone built in, and you just clip it to your collar or wherever, and use that to record. What I've been doing with it is actually using it for streaming. They've got surprisingly good battery life, and the one on the camera is exactly the same size that receives the audio, and basically I can then channel the audio and my picture through the camera rather than needing a separate set of cables. for my microphone, which just means I can get the stuff set up more quickly. It feels like less of a barrier to doing the streaming, and I'm more encouraged to do it. And I can also move around more freely without fear of the audio quality dropping, because this is permanently attached to me. So my Focusrite's currently retired at the moment, or at least on the bench.
Very cool device,
find
that,
a better
actually.
use.
Because I remember when I was down as well, we used it a bit for streaming. So because we were doing VR streams specifically, I had that on me. I think when I was moving around with the VR device, so I was always capturing the audio in like a reasonable format as well. Yeah, so very, very cool device. And I do see tons of YouTubers and kind of Instagram Reel people and YouTube Short people doing very small clips. Great for. I think it must connect to your phone as well in some way. Because it looks like a lot
you can
of
plug it into your phone. Yeah. So basically, I mean, I don't know how it works with. I don't think it can be connected via USB lead. Maybe it can. USB-C charges. I'd have thought you'd have needed the audio jack, but maybe not. Maybe it can just be connected. I've never tried it. To be honest, I use it purely on the camera, but that might be something to give a whirl to.
Yeah.
And as you said, a lot of this stuff, and I guess I'll just echo the point. It's not stuff that we have predominantly bought for the podcast, with probably the exception of the prompter for true content creation. Everything else has had multiple purposes over the years, multiple hobbies, multiple interests that have resulted in these purchases. Because you can do a lot of this without this equipment.
Definitely.
As you're proving, if you've got a semi-decent phone, you can set your phone up and use that as a camera. You don't need super expensive microphones. I think there is an argument out there, and you'll see people say this in the media production world, that you can get away with slightly patchy video if the audio is good. But if your audio is bad, it doesn't matter how good your video is, it's jarring and off-putting, and people will often turn off.
Yeah.
So I think if you're going to invest anywhere, spend a little bit more on your audio, get that right, and let the picture catch up, or the production value catch up, and we'll talk about the software side and hardware involved in the editing in a minute. But I feel like you could probably do a much lower budget version of what we're doing and still create a really good quality output. And I'm sure there are people who do podcasts with better audio and better video than we do for less. This just happens to be our setup.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on that, I guess the last hardware thing that I had to mention was just my PC, which again would be excessive if it was just for the podcast. It's quite a large desktop gaming PC it's very specced out. I think it's got a 3080 Ti in it, and a stupid processor in there. But all that stuff is not really purposeful for the podcast. It just happened that I had a gaming PC that had these powerful hardware specs that I was able to use for audio editing and recording and all the other things that are quite demanding on PCs as well. But yeah, I got that from scan.co.uk. It's a 3XS machine, so it's one of the ones that they custom build. You can spec it out yourself on the website.
I did similar. My PC is not as expensive as yours, but it's still reasonably priced. I didn't buy mine for gaming, so that's where I think my money savings are, because
it's always in the GPU.
Yeah, my GPU is much more average. But mine was bought and spec'd out for streaming, but it's not streaming and running the game. So all of my streaming is done console into an Elgato capture card and then done that way. So the actual PC doesn't need to be that beefy.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you stream, you've had this challenge before, haven't you? Where you've had to kind of downscale the game's performance in order to make sure that your PC could cope with both.
Yes.
I don't have that problem, but then obviously I can't. I can play games on my PC. It's perfectly fine. They're just not going to look as amazing as they would on yours. They're probably no better than the modern consoles, to be honest, which is fine because I don't play games on it. But I bought mine for streaming and editing, so a lot of video and photography stuff at the time. And then the final thing, or the final reason for moving away from my previous device, was I wanted to get into 3D modeling. And my PC at the time just couldn't cope with the 3D software, the things like... what was the software called at the time? ZBrush, I think I was looking at the time. So that was the reason for upgrading the PC. It just happens that it's become very useful and very handy for this purpose. I don't, ironically, as we'll talk about in a minute, actually edit on this PC.
Yeah.
I do that somewhere else, but I'll explain that after, I guess, we've talked about the first step in our editing workflow. So once this is all captured, Robbie and I bundle all of the relevant files into a folder on our OneDrive. And then Robbie you want to talk through the first part of the workflow?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, in capture in the audio, we've managed to get it down to a fine art now, where we've got a split up between the desktop and my audio. So we're basically, the output of OBS is a video with these audio files attached in the background. But in order to get the multiple audio files from this video, because it's all just packaged as one video, I use my music editing software to separate out the audio from the video and separate it into different tracks, so then I can go into editing from there. And the software that I use for that is Cubase. So Cubase 12 Pro is the version that I've got. And again, I did purchase this, I think, after we started the podcast. So it definitely was one of the reasons I bought it. But also, I was looking for a more robust music editing software as well. So I record music with friends and bands. So it's predominantly for music recording, but it's got some fantastic audio editing tools that I use as part of the editing workflow as well. So it extracts the multiple tracks from the video. I put them into multiple tracks, depending on how many audio I've captured. I think it's mostly just 2 that I capture as part of the video. And then you send me over yours now as well. So that's a recent addition, is that your OBS capture is dumped in that OneDrive folder as well. And I do a very similar thing for yours, is I just bring that into Cubase, extract the audio from the video, and have that on a separate track as well. So I'll have 3 tracks, which is my audio, the desktop audio, which includes your audio, and I have that in there just in case I'm showing up any videos or anything like that. It has some audio on there. And then your audio that's sent directly to me, which is captured on your end as well. So the super clean J audio. So I've got these 3, and then as part of the edit, I balance between them to make sure that the levels are correct. I do some compression on there because although we're trying to get better, we're not super professional in going in and out of the microphone. So a compressor is really important.
There's nothing professional about us, Robbie, when it comes to this show.
Well, arguably the equipment, all the gear, no idea. That's what they say, isn't it?
That's exactly right, yeah.
But yeah, so I use a compressor to make sure that the levels of the audio are quite consistent. And I use various boosts here and there and various DSs to reduce the annoying sounds that you hear as well. And then again, this has been iterated so many times. Basically, every episode it's slightly different, although I used the previous episode as a template. And hopefully it's getting better. It's gotten better over time. But yeah, essentially just trying to make sure we're as loud as we can without hitting the kind of peaks of what YouTube would allow, basically, as you're part of uploading. And again, a very iterative process. We started off quite quiet and then recently realized we were quiet and then upped the volume over time and did various fixes. So Cubase is the program that I'm used for that, and export that from Cubase and then put it straight back into the OneDrive and then leave it up to Jay for the next steps of the editing.
Yeah, so it comes back to me with a nice clean audio track, and I basically, so for editing, I do that on my MacBook. Years ago, long time ago, I learnt with a lot of hours invested in learning Final Cut Pro, Final Cut Pro 10. And I did that at the time for my own video making hobby and for some work stuff that I did in a previous job. And that's basically the tool that I'd learned. And I have tried software in between as I moved away from Mac for a period. Couldn't get my head around Premiere Pro and some other tools as well. I appreciate that the industry standard is either Premiere Pro or Final Cut, probably more so Premiere Pro than Final Cut. But my brain was wired by that point, and it was wired to do editing in Final Cut, and I wanted things to be where I expected them to be. So I moved back to the Mac. I must say I've had my license for Final Cut Pro now for got to be 10 years, and I haven't had to buy a new one. They continually update it. I'm impressed with how they support that software. It's kind of crazy, really. I think it was maybe £300 in that region back at the time, so not cheap. But the fact that they've continued to update it and support it for 10 years means that ultimately it's paid for itself.
That's crazy. And just as a side note, I bought Cubase probably earlier this year, Cubase 12, and this week they've just brought out Cubase 13.
At times, maybe you do need to move over to Logic Pro then, because I imagine that's supported in the same way
probably
as Final Cut. But anyway, so I use Final Cut. My workflow is pretty simple, and because of the work that Robbie does on OBS with the transitions for the video and moving us in and out of the browser and looking at content when we're talking about it, and because of all the visual effects we applied to the video, my editing is actually very, very straightforward. So video comes in, audio comes in, I detach the original video audio and reattach the new clean audio that Robbie's produced. I will top and tail it. So take off the bit of rubbish before we actually get started, and usually where we make the most edits, which is cocking up the intro, tidy up the bit at the end, and very, very recently, and we will do this today as well, snip out a little bit from the middle if needed. But generally speaking, I top and tail. I drop our intro and our outro music and video in, which is templated now. And for those who watch on YouTube, you won't ever hear it in the podcast because I'm very mindful not to put any audio to it. But we have that visual prompt that encourages you to like and subscribe. So please do that if you haven't, because we'd love it to have you. Then I will export it. So I export the audio separately for the podcast upload. I export the video. And then once those are exporting, I usually take Robbie's prompt as to what he thinks a good short looks like that week. And I'll go and make the short, which again, all done through Final Cut, and export it. So by the end of that process, it takes a little bit of time. It's quite a large file. I have 3 files that I then need to start thinking about for the next step. One thing that I've added to my setup, but I've not had a chance to properly use yet, which I'll probably use on this episode, so a little bit of inception there, is the Stream Deck Plus that I mentioned earlier on. So I've already got a Stream Deck, which I have set up at the other end of my office, which is for when I'm actually streaming, which for those who never use them, it's basically a panel with programmable buttons with visual like little screens basically on each button that you can code into a number of different use cases and shortcuts and macros and commands for your PC. Great for streaming. That's where it started. Now people use them for all sorts of stuff. And I bought the Stream Deck Plus, which basically has 8 of those programmable buttons, a segmented touch bar, and then 4 dials for more accurate control. And from the Elgato store, I also bought a Final Cut package, which someone had produced. It's about £28, I think it was. And that basically gave me a whole ream of pre-programmed buttons, dials, and knobs, the full works. That means now all of my shortcuts and all of the workflow can be moved to the Stream Deck. So very little needs to be done on the keyboard and even the mouse to some degree once I learn how to use it properly. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how well, and perhaps I'll give you an update in a few weeks' time, that is improving my workflow. But I haven't had a chance to use it yet, so it doesn't get used today. So that gets us then to the point where we've got our files. We've got the product we want to put out there. And that doesn't leave us with a huge amount then. So I'll just touch on a couple of last steps. So the last thing that I will typically do is produce the thumbnail for YouTube. So that's usually a collaboration in terms of ideas with Robbie, some selfie taking, which we both hate, but we do, and then Photoshop for me to cut us out and combine us with any creative backgrounds. I also use Canva, which is a free app. A lot of YouTubers use Canva for sort of thumbnail creation. It gives you fast, simple kind of templates that you can pull together. We've established a look and feel. We've iterated over time to try and improve them, make them more engaging. But I produce that, so as I say, combination of Photoshop and Canva. And then once it's all done, the video files go to YouTube along with the thumbnail, as you might expect. We've recently started to try and improve kind of the algorithm play and the search engine optimization. So we've been tagging, adding chapters to try and improve the navigation of the video. We've been adding end cards, doing some of the stuff that we didn't do in the early days. And then in terms of the audio file, that goes to Libsyn, which is our chosen podcast storage and syndication platform. There are numbers out there, but basically we put the audio on there along with the description and all that good stuff that Robbie produces, and then we schedule them. And we schedule them maybe a few days before they go live. We used to do the full recording like on a Monday and release on a Friday. We, due to busy work schedules, have had to extend that a little bit and move them around a bit, but we still try to do them, within a week or so that our content is relevant and topical and up to date. So, and that completes the process. Robbie, anything you want to add that I've missed there, or any of your kind of thoughts on those latter steps?
No, I think you covered it all quite well. The only thing I'd say, not to pat ourselves on the back too much, but we have managed to do 43 episodes now every week. We haven't missed a week, and that's with holidays and various busyness with works and stuff like that. So it's in doing all these steps outside of just the sitting down and recording it as well, they do take time, and it's not something that that can be done away from the house. So if you're traveling for whatever reason as well, it's very difficult. So yeah, the fact that we've managed to do that, I think, is quite impressive. Again, I don't want to pat ourselves on the back too much, but that's something not something to underestimate. I think is the coordination of that, especially if you're committing to once a week.
Absolutely, and I think that's and the other challenge is we can't do those activities in parallel, because I can't do my bit till you've done yours. So there's always that kind of waiting game. Both of us are working to condense timelines. You've got to get your stuff done in order for me to be able to do what I need to do to hit the deadline. I can't start mine till you've done yours, and then I've got to hit the deadline. So, it is a lot of effort. It's been a big commitment throughout the year, but it's been a lot of fun as well. It's specifically challenging when you and I both had this part of 3 weeks off at different parts of the year where we couldn't be around to record, and we had some tough weeks stockpiling episodes to make sure that we had cover for that. But it's a lot of fun, and I think what I've really enjoyed, and we talk about this a lot offline, but for the purpose of wrapping this up, thoroughly enjoyed that creative process. It's a whole raft of things that go into this. Challenges as well. We've had issues. Every week there's an issue with OBS or Discord at one of our ends without fail. We've made mistakes. We've, as we said, tried to iterate and improve the output every week. There's always something that we do a little bit differently. We always try and solve a problem. We very rarely sat back and just kind of repeated the same steps over and over, whether that is changing up the format, changing up the content, tweaking we always try and get under an hour. We always fail miserably, and probably have again today. But, it's been a really interesting and fun iterative process, and one that, we enjoy doing. So it's not a chore. It is difficult around full-time jobs, but, constantly evolving the way we do it. And that's been great. Yeah.
The topics, like thinking of topics as well, is also something that's not to be underestimated. Weekly topics, you're talking 52 a year, where you've got to have 52 different things to talk about that's going to be interesting enough to put on a podcast. And so some of the episodes are obviously going to do better than others, are going to be more interesting for viewers than others. But yeah, thinking of the topics can be quite difficult, especially sometimes with our planning on Notion as well. We'll have a list of ideas and schedules, and then we might not think about it again for a couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden we haven't got anything planned for the next 3 or 4 episodes, and we have to kind of brainstorm ideas on what to record. So that's an interesting element of as well, and I think that's quite a cool creative process as well. It just so happens that we both really enjoy keeping in the tech loop and looking on tech news and watching YouTube videos around technology and gaming. So there's always things that we can pull on, I think, for ideas. But if you're not already interested in the topic, it would be really hard to think of topics to discuss on the episode, for sure.
Oh, God, yeah. And I think, it's fair to say we have tried to vary the content a little bit. There's a format to the show, which I think most people appreciate as some sort of routine. We've tried topics which we, when we look at the analytics, haven't done as well. We tried a completely different format for Halloween. We did, a bit of gaming, and that didn't do very well. But that's okay, because we're not doing this to be successful YouTubers or, paid podcasters or anything like that. We just do it for fun. So
that was one of the most fun episodes to record as well.
It was a lot of fun. Challenging from a tech point of view. That's perhaps one to dig into another time. Streaming is another challenge in itself. But I think what's important to me, and I know you said the same thing, is that we're making stuff that we enjoy. So it's not about doing really well. It's about trying to find people that are a bit like us, that are nerdy like us, that want to listen to us, talk about things that we get equally excited and nerdy about. And I think that's ultimately what this is. So hopefully for those of you that do listen regularly, or that you're finding us anew today, perhaps you'll just, you'll find your way through some of our older episodes as well, and you'll enjoy just listening to us geek out about stuff that we get super excited about.
Absolutely.
Anything else to add on our setup, Robbie, that we haven't covered?
Nothing, I think. I think we've covered it all.
Brilliant. In that case, then, I think it's probably about time we call this episode to an end. So thank you for hanging out with us. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching here on YouTube, and give that notification bell a smash as well. And subscribe on all good podcast services so you don't miss an episode. We will see you next time.